Hi everyone. In this channel, I cover a lot of socio-political issues, a lot of them within the UK. And I am aware that sometimes it can appear to be a cynical or negative angle. But what I have never done, I can honestly say I've never done, is make a sweeping judgment about the entire country in a negative sense. I don't think I've ever used the term Britain is broken. I did have one video a while back discussing the idea, is Britain broken? But that was sort of an open reflection rather than making it as a statement, because I don't actually think it is the case. And I want to quantify that a bit. We have problems. Of course, we have problems. Every country has problems. There's things about my country I don't particularly like, and I would like to see changed or evolved or completely eradicated, quite frankly. But I'm relatively well travelled, and I'm still relatively grateful to live in this country. In fact, very grateful to live in this country, because for all the problems we have, I'm acutely aware that there are many parts of the world that are significantly worse. And I don't want to create a diplomatic fallout with this video, so I'm not going to focus too much on making comparisons to some other countries that, well, with smaller countries at least. There are powerful adversaries that this country has. And I have absolutely no issue with talking about them. Three nation states come to mind: Russia, China, and Iran. North Korea, yeah, but I don't think it has the same clout, international clout. Um, when I look at people running down this country, I really get quite frustrated by that, because what does it solve? I think it's much better to focus on a particular area and say, look, this is the problem. Let's talk about that. Let's deal with that, rather than just saying it's all bad, because it isn't all bad. It really, really isn't. I mean, off the top of my head, we're not in a civil war, despite what Elon Musk and others might say. Not even close. Not even close. Um, we sometimes have flooding and storms, but we don't really get the sort of extreme natural disasters causing significant death that other countries unfortunately do experience. We don't get that. We have poverty, but it isn't extreme crippling poverty that you get in some parts of the world. We have a welfare system which, whilst flawed, is there. There is a safety net. In other parts of the world, there is no safety net. Crime is significant enough, but it's significantly lower than other parts of the world. We actually have a relatively low homicide rate. Some people might be surprised to hear that, but if you look at international rankings, it is true. And you can factor in manslaughter as well, but it would still be significantly lower than many other parts of the world. That's just the truth. But we live in an era of disinformation, and an era where sometimes the loudest voices get the most traction. And that's really a problem, because sometimes the loudest voices are the very dishonest voices. But I really, really question anyone who spends all their energy running this country down. With regards to the immigration system, I'm broadly in the centre with that. I mean, I want a controlled system, but I wouldn't just raise the drawbridge and shut everyone out. I would say my views on immigration are pretty mainstream. That is to say, I want control, but I don't want to just put a door up to everyone. But I look at other areas as well. I mean, so I think with the immigration thing, just to focus on this for a minute, I think one of the litmus tests, one of the things we should look at is how people feel about this country, not just what they know about the country or what they, can contribute financially. I think that's an absurd model to say if someone's wealthy, they're therefore going to be a good asset. They might well be a billionaire and still have an anti-UK agenda. So it's a stupid metric to... I mean, do we really want to welcome Russian oligarchs who may have ties to Putin? Think about it. So I really have a problem with that model. I would look much more at ideology. How do people feel about this country? I mean, that to me is common sense. And I think someone who has displayed significant hostility to the UK as a country, um, it should be common sense not to let them into the country. I'm not talking about they once criticised the British government or they dislike some things the British government does. I'm talking about just a generic hostility to the UK. So, for instance, if they criticise something the British government's done, but they said, oh, but I love British culture, I'd probably be okay with that. But if they were just anti-British in general, why would we want someone like that in this country? Okay, that's one area. But then we look at British citizens who hate this country and who constantly run down this country. And I find that they straddle both the far right and the far left. Focusing on the far right. You know, they really wrap themselves in flags and they really pretend to love this country. But they're so negative. Same with the populist and hard right. I mean, Farage went to Washington DC to basically talk about how totalitarian we are under Starmer. What does it say about someone who's going to go to another country to run this country down? I think a genuine patriot wouldn't do that. I honestly think Farage is a carnival barker. I think he's a chancer. I think he's smart enough to have got as far as he has, but I don't trust him. And, you know, I see these people just spending all their time on social media saying how broken Britain is, how terrible it is. It's just constant negativity from them. I mean, one of my issues with the Reform Party is it is overtly negative. It's not a positive movement. Everything is about how terrible Labour is and how Starmer's supposedly a dictator and how we're living in a broken country. It's just overt negativity. For all their supposed patriotism, Reform spends a hell of a lot of time running this country down. But then on the other side of the spectrum, of course, the hard left and the far left also have a problem in this country. If you look at the Jeremy Corbyns of this world, you know, everything is the fault of the West. The whole worldview is to blame the West first and only. They've always had a problem with that as well. Then I think of, I don't know if you call them another category, but it's something that one can observe. You get these independent people, and sometimes they claim to be independent journalists, sometimes they claim to be travel vloggers. And in a sense, that's what they are, but it's glaringly obvious that they're also pushing an agenda. Now, what I'm talking about is this isn't genuine travel journalism or a sort of genuinely open-minded approach of, okay, I've been to this country and this is the good and this is the bad. Anyone who goes to another part of the world, particularly a country known to be hostile to this country, i.e. China, and they spend all their time praising that country and the rest of the time attacking this country, that isn't an open-minded approach. That is pushing an agenda. And I would actually cite one specific channel I've got in mind. It's called Living in China, and the guy calls himself Jason Living in China. It's quite a big channel, 634,000 subscribers, certainly a lot bigger than this channel. The point with that is, with that sort of platform, there is power. Now, what does Jason Living in China do with his videos? Everything has got an angle of how wonderful China is, and how the West misinterprets China, and how Western media maligns China. This guy could be working for CGTN or Xinhua, you know, because that's the sort of thing, the sort of message he's putting out. And I'm someone who's lived and worked in China, so I'm not coming from a perspective of, oh, I've never been there and I'm ignorant about it. And what I would say is, yes, there's a lot of positive. People are generally hospitable and welcoming, particularly young people. There's some wonderful things to see. The food's fantastic. The cost of living is generally pretty affordable, more so than the UK. But then you have to factor in the fact that per capita, it's not as wealthy as the UK. Obviously, a country with a bigger GDP per capita is going to be more expensive. China has a bigger GDP overall, but not per capita. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of positive things about China. But I'm proud to say that never did I sell out. I never took the easy path of saying I'm just going to praise the system there and bash my own country. I never done it. Never. It was an experience that I valued. Sometimes I even miss it because I enjoyed the work that I done. I worked at high school. But I never ever sold out my country. Ever. I remember there was a time I was with a colleague and she kindly invited me to her hometown. We were in the car, we were in a sort of rural mountain area, and she started praising Mao and Mao's record. Now, I'm a guest. I'm in her husband's car in a rural area, literally in a winding mountain path. I'm not going to get into an in-depth political debate there and then. I just wasn't going to do it. But I didn't agree with her. It just I think what I actually done was change the subject. So that way I didn't sell out on my convictions because I'd been reading the very eminent book Mao the Unknown Story by Yung Chang and John Halliday, and in that they cover the Cultural Revolution. There was a teacher, a head teacher actually, one of the first victims of that, beaten to death by her own students. This was a direct result of Mao's fanaticism, the brainwashing of the Red Guards. So I could very well have said, no, how can you say that? He was a mass murdering tyrant. But I didn't because, I'm a guest and what would be the point of getting into... And obviously also a little bit of me, I didn't want the awkwardness of it. Of course I didn't. But I never agreed with her. And I'm proud of that. It would have been so easy to just say, oh yeah, you're absolutely right. He was a wonderful man. I did not say that. I didn't sell out. Now I have a theory that there are some Westerners who tap into a very lucrative market. That is to say, they go to parts of the world where politically there's great animosity towards the West and the UK. And they attack the West. And that's what they do. Absolutely, it's what this guy does. All his videos are about China. He's got one back in the UK, back in London, and it's all negative. Look how terrible everything is. So the guy's pushing an agenda. Now he insists that he is not paid by the Chinese government. He insists that he's not working for any agency. And he may genuinely be freelance. Nevertheless, what he is doing is tapping into poisonous anti-West propaganda. I mean, I would also point out it's just massive hypocrisy to stir up hatred and animosity towards your own country whilst coming back here. What I would say to Jason living in China, stay the hell in China. Because people like you are, I'll say it, I think you're a bloody traitor. I really believe that. I don't care if that's inflammatory, that's what I think of you. I actually think that people like this who actively serve to attack their own country, there's something seriously wrong with them. And I'm not even talking about having positive feelings towards China. Okay, have those positive feelings. But he is doing it in the vein of attacking the West. That's the agenda that he's pushing. And he keeps pretending to be so honest. But he's not. He's not showing the whole picture. So everything in China positive, everything in the UK negative. That is not an honest picture. And he knows it. And yet, someone like that has significant power because of the platform that they have. A video like that, or videos like that, are going to be hugely popular with Chinese nationalists who would love a Westerner telling them how Western media is so biased and basically regurgitating everything you would hear on Xinhua or CGTN. Don't know why it doesn't just work for them and be done with it. But I mentioned it's a lucrative market. I've also come across Westerners who do these travel videos in Iran. And what they'll do is they'll cite, for example, friendly locals. And they'll say, oh, look, the West has misunderstood Iran. But the thing is, that's a distortion. It is a distortion because Western media never says all Chinese people are bad. It never says that all Chinese people are crazy, enraged communists. The coverage is about politics. So what these guys are doing is extremely manipulative. They're sort of presenting this situation where the West is deeply racist and Western media is deeply racist. I don't think it is actually. I mean, if you get one of these vloggers and they're going through Iran and they're looking at historic sites and trekking and all the rest of it, that side may well be true, but they're not showing you in prison. They're not showing the torture chambers. And that's what's so utterly contemptible about these people. They're cherry picking. The fact that they're doing it with an agenda. And if they were nationalists from those countries, you would sort of get it. Because it's what they've been conditioned to do. It's sort of, okay, well, the West is against us, so we're going to push back. But what I think is unforgivable is the fact that they are Westerners. So they're stabbing their own country in the back. At a time when we do face existential threats. I mean, without question, there are state threats to the UK. Not helped by Labour's weakness when it comes to China. But I actually believe that one of the problems in the West is we're too damn tolerant. And what I mean by that is not that we should be intolerant. I actually think that we're intolerant to the wrong people. We're too tolerant of people that we shouldn't be tolerant of. I don't think we should show much leeway to British citizens who spend all their time tearing this country down and serving against it. The two Christophers who would have been on trial, I don't know if those men are guilty or not. If they are, I think the right thing would be to serve long prison terms as a warning to others. Now this guy, Jason living in China, I don't have any evidence to say that he's a spy, but I would say that someone in that position who's using their energy to stir up hatred against the UK and the West, you have to objectively ask, what is the purpose? You see, I do loathe the Chinese government, but I don't loathe China. And I've never said everything about China is bad. What he does is says everything about China is wonderful and the West is terrible. So who's more objective? So, you know, I love my country enough to say these things. I love my country enough to speak out on this. I'm sick and tired of people running down the UK. If you don't like it and you have the means to, please get the hell out. Really, because you're not making yourself happier and you're not producing anything for this country. You're not contributing in any way, shape or form by bringing all this negativity. It's one thing to say that things are bad and then to get into the political arena and try and make a positive change. But that's the point. There needs to be a positive message. If it's all negative, then what are you offering? And these vloggers who think they're so open-minded because they're well-travelled, they know that they're cherry-picking. They know what they're doing. And it's extremely manipulative. Extremely. Because, like I say, it's a lucrative market. They just worm the way into this sort of narrative whereby, oh look, I'm a Westerner, I'm telling the truth. All the other Westerners are racist. It's all xenophobia, it's all Russophobia, it's all Iranophobia. I have a lot more respect for dissidents in those countries who know the truth and who took very real risks than Western weasels who go to those countries only to act as propagandists. Now, again, I'm not talking about someone who's been on holiday in China, worked in China, and have some positive things to say about it. I'm not talking about that, because I've done that myself. I'm talking about people who are pushing an agenda, an anti-West agenda. If you're a Westerner and you're spending all your time attacking the West, then what is your game, really? And the sad thing about this is they do have significant influence. So, it would be easy to just dismiss them as attention seekers, but they do have significant influence. A lot more than this channel. I freely admit that. Um, but it really concerns me and it really angers me because they are they're flying in the face of brave dissidents who risk jail and in some cases even worse for standing up to these ghastly regimes. And I'm talking about the regimes, I'm not talking about the countries. Um, so it bothers me. I think that people like Jason living in China um, need to be questioned by MI5, quite frankly. He may well be totally innocent, he may well not be a spy. But when you're spending all your time attacking the UK and the West and praising a hostile, powerful adversary, then what is your game? I think it's common sense for the security services to be looking into someone like that. Really. Because the Chinese government and the Russian government and other adversaries would absolutely see these people as an asset, without question. Whether they actually use them or not is another matter. But, if I'm Chinese state security, I would be looking at someone like this and saying this guy is useful for sort of soft power propaganda. He's British, so he could easily just rail against the West and he could tell Westerners about how wonderful things are and how they've got it all wrong. Well, as someone who's lived and worked in China, I can tell you there is two sides. There was a positive, absolutely there was, but there was a negative as well. I had to be very careful what I said. I got threatened out there. What had actually happened was I experimented one day in QQ, which is the Chinese social media site, and I said, there's certain things I would like to say, but I can't say everything here. And with that, a woman who was the mother of a student that I had taught, thankfully she was in another city, but she basically sent veiled threats towards me. She wanted to know what school I was in. And she got into a very angry rant, and it was basically threats. One of my students very bravely stood up to her, which I'm very grateful for. But there was definitely an atmosphere at that time of having to be very careful. I was told in no uncertain terms, do not talk about politics, religion, or relationships in your classes, and I didn't. I wasn't going to be reckless. But there's definitely that side of it there. Now, someone like Jason living in China, I don't know if it's just greed or if it's genuine affection for the country. But he says he's been there for 13 years. And the thing is, with living in a society like China for that long, you will inevitably start to be influenced. I mean, that's just common sense. You're going to be influenced and start to then look at the problems in a country like the UK and feel hostility. But if you are devoting your energy to pushing propaganda, which what it is blatantly is. I mean, one of his videos, infuriating, it says Western media lies about China. This could come directly from the CCP, really. And it disgusts me because there are courageous people who've stood up to this regime. I think of the young Hong Kong students who are 100 times braver than someone like him. He has it comfortable. He's a useful asset, so it's all good for him. Gets the money. And I don't know, I just feel, honestly, I feel total disgust with people like that. And some people might say, well, why bother about it? But they have influence, they have power. And they're abusing that power. If you spent 13 years in China as a British citizen and then you come back and you just want to attack this country and say everything's terrible, what's your agenda? Is it just a candid opinion? Or what are you actually trying to do with that? Because when you then couple that with the other videos and you start to see what this guy's about, and he's not the only one, I don't mean to just focus on one person. Like I say, there's vloggers who go to a country like Iran and say it's all Western misconceptions. I propose that you can visit any country on the face of the earth and find good and bad. But positive propaganda is just as problematic, I think, as negative propaganda. Because if you're putting out the narrative that it's all good and any negativity must be Western media lies, then that's pushing an agenda. Of course it is. And unfortunately, a lot of people jump on the bandwagon. A lot of them will be nationalists from those countries, so you understand that. But other Westerners jump on the bandwagon. I am so grateful and frankly proud that I never sold my soul. I had a good experience. People were accommodating and helpful, so I always differentiate between people and governments, or at least I try to. Um, but I never sold my soul, not once. And my message to Jason living in China: fuck you. You know damn well what you're doing, and you're just lucky that this country is so tolerant that we allow someone like you to come back and just spout out all your BS, all your negativity, and you get away with it. Galloway was questioned at, I believe it was Gatwick Airport a while back, with his partner. They'd spent time in Moscow. Now, given his track record, I think someone like George Galloway should definitely be followed up by MI5. One of the problems with a liberal democracy is the sense that in our great fear of overriding authority, I think we can take our eye off the ball sometimes and tolerate people, frankly, we shouldn't be tolerating. Someone like George Galloway, who rails against this country, who, in my opinion, has served as a propagandist for our enemies. I think we're far too tolerant of people like that, really. Um, I'll wrap this up, but I will close with this message. Yes, we have problems. People have every right to talk about those problems because we have free speech. But if you're spending all your time running down this country, you're not a patriot. You're not a patriot. And if you're doing it from another part of the world, particularly a country like China or Russia or Iran that is hostile to this country, then you can't really whine about being seen as a potential asset to that country. It's just common sense.